Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today is my top 10 books of 2024. This video is a bit overdue. I hope you don't mind because I love watching these videos. I'm still watching these videos, like I'm slowly making my way. They're one of my favorite videos to watch. It feels so satisfying to watch people like definitively sort of rank the best of their reading years. I just love it. One thing about my ranking is it's kind of arbitrary. Like these are just my top 10. You could shuffle around this list a couple of different times and it would probably still make sense to me. So the ranking is not super set in stone. All of them I would recommend. That's all you need to know. At number 10, we have Descartes' Meditations on First Philosophy. This was a real surprise for me because this is the infamous book where he says that, you know, cogito ergo sum. This is where all that kind of thinking happened, and that argument has been presented to me before in also such a diluted way. Like you just kind of, you can reduce it to steps. You can be like, first this, then this. These are the steps he took in his thinking. But actually reading the book, thinking along with him to get to that final conclusion, it just came at me so blindingly, so brilliantly. It was like a eureka moment. It felt fresh, even though I was already familiar with the idea. I highly recommend this for beginners even. It's not that complicated. Honestly, you can do it. Read the first 5 meditations. There's 6. The 6th one is the one, but you have to read them because they go kind of in chronological order. And once you reach that final meditation, the payoff is so big. But yeah, this took me by surprise. I didn't think it would be that good, and that final meditation is just absolutely mind-blowing and definitely something you should experience for yourself at some point. Number 9 on my list, I have loaned out my physical copy to my partner's mom. She's currently reading that right now, and this is Rifqa by Mohammed El-Kurd. This is the only poetry that is on this list. This is a poetry collection about sort of Mohammed El-Kurd's, it's very personal, it's very intimate. It's about sort of his personal identity, his memories of Palestine, his grandma Rifqa, his family, like everything they kind of lost, kind of loss of identity, loss of property, loss of land. It's so painful, it's so difficult to read in some ways, it's so insane that it's real, you know? It's just so heartbreaking, and like the content itself is just kind of like super intense, as I'm sure you can imagine, but the writing was so good. The writing was so standout. I was so surprised. I don't know why, I've never read El-Kurd before, but I didn't know about him. I just picked this up kind of randomly and it was like unreal. It was actually unreal. Every single poem is a banger, smash hit, which feels really wrong to say about poems that have such like devastating content, but the writing was just so good. The writing is really exceptional. So these poems are great. It's a good collection of like banger after banger, and you never really get that with poetry collections, so I highly recommend this one. If you want like a smash hit poetry collection, this is the one. Number 8 was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This was a first time read for me. I never read this. I put it off for so long. I was like, no way, it's that good. Why is everyone obsessed with this book? There's no way. And I love being contrarian like that. Can't explain it. It's like just my psychology. But I finally picked this up and I'm so glad I did. It was really, really good. I didn't think it was gonna be. I actually kind of love having like controversial opinions on books a little bit. Like, makes me feel kind of nice to have a contrarian attitude about things sometimes, but this really, I couldn't have that because I was just completely roped in, and this was really genuinely better than I thought it was going to be. It's kind of a crime novel, like you know that somebody's dead at the very beginning of the book, and yet Donna Tartt is able to just like build so much tension. There's so much mystery. You kind of get psychologically thrilled out of it. So it's kind of a psychological thriller, but it also has the writing that is so literary fiction-esque, but like even more than that, it's just like so decadent. It's so self-indulgent and but in a good way, like in an obviously intentional way. It's so interesting. You meet these really strange characters that you get kind of equally as enthralled by as the main character does, and you just kind of want to get closer to them. Like there's something so seductive about them, and there's something so seductive going on in general in their studies, and you're just like roped in, and all of a sudden you're in, and like horrible things are happening, and you're just like, it's too late. I found myself feeling so disturbed so many times during this book. Like I was actually shocked by like the depravity. It was really good. This is such a good story. It's not really ever gonna leave you. And the tension and the like stress I had in the second half of the book, I think was just very unique. I just needed to find out what happened or else I would like combust. It's actually as good as people say it is. It's possibly even a little bit better. At number 7, we have The Wall by Marlene Haushofer. My partner's father is currently reading this. Actually, he finished it. He texted me and told me about it. He loved it. So you have this woman who is all of a sudden the last person on earth, and she has no idea like what happened. It just kind of happens overnight. So she just doesn't know. There's just all of a sudden this invisible wall and she can't like cross it. So she's just kind of stuck in the mountains. There's a dog. She kind of encounters animals. She grows really close with a lot of them, which is like a beautiful little thing. If you're into that, like human animal relationships, it's very mundane, her existence. She has to try to survive the winter and she's completely cut off from the rest of the world. So she has to, you know, do hard things, and her life is honestly like pretty rough, but she finds so much peace in it. It's such an interesting story. It's also very like feminist in a way. She finds so much freedom in being away from society and societal expectations and constructs that maybe she never really agreed with. And it's just every once in a while you get like a tidbit from her, some kind of like observation about the world and society and everything like that. I don't know. It's such a strange, quiet, slow little book that is just haunting and kind of never really leaves you. Number 6 is Solaris by Stanislaw Lem. This is a sci-fi classic from Poland. I thought this was just going to be pulpy sci-fi, and I was like, you know what? I'm super in the mood for that. I kind of love that. It is pulpy sci-fi, but it's also like interesting speculative fiction. So this book is about a planet called Solaris that is sentient and kind of like alive, and scientists have known about it for a really long time, but it's just like they can't understand. There's no way. It's just not technically possible given everything we understand about evolution and life sciences and stuff like that. It's just not really possible, but it seems to be the case. And so scientists are trying to like run tests on it, trying to figure it out and stuff. The book is like filled with philosophical musings on like the limits of human knowledge, the limits of human rationality, and what we do when we don't understand things, how we respond to that. But at the same time, there's also just kind of this kind of psychologically slightly scary plot of like weird stuff going on. You follow a man who goes to the space station on Solaris, and he's a scientist, and there's like a couple other scientists, and all of them are acting so weird. There's like some really weird stuff going on. So you have like a pulpy sci-fi plot, but then you have like a lot more about like what lies beyond the limits of human understanding. My number 5 book, I actually don't have a copy of. I listened to this on audiobook, and that's The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. This was wonderful. It really knocked me out of the park. I didn't know what to expect. It's nonfiction kind of essays, but also personal essays. It's like a combo of like memoir style stuff. Plus you learn fun facts about like human history and human inventions. It's got a bit of everything, but everything makes sense together, I think. It was written during the pandemic, so you get a little bit of tidbits from the why is tidbits like forward in my vocabulary today? I don't really know. He talks a lot about his mental health, like his struggles with OCD and depression, which were just so honest and genuine. Like he was so earnest about it and made me cry sometimes. And there were a lot of things about his experience that were so relatable for me. And I feel like what's really special about it, and possibly is the thing that really makes it the best, other than the fact that it's like so sincere and genuine and you can feel that this is really who he is. Like he will talk about being worried about all the damage that humans have done, not only to the planet, but like to other animals and to others. He's a bit of a nerd. Like he knows a lot about a lot. Even while facing all those realities, all those facts about human history, he is so hopeful about our species, and even like facing all the numbers about what's happening with climate change, he's so hopeful and he wants to save us. Like it's such a strange little book where he's actually really optimistic about humans instead of being like a total pessimist or like a nihilist about us. And I found that really refreshing, and it just kind of, I don't know, hearing it from someone I kind of respect, it was, I don't know, hope giving to me as well. And it was kind of validating to me as well that like the way that I feel about other humans is like a attainable position to hold, even if I know what we're doing and I've like stared into the absolute like baseness of the worst things we've done. Like even though I know those things and I try to educate myself and like I keep up with stuff, it's kind of still possible for me to grow up and not be completely jaded by that and still kind of maintain some kind of hope for our species and the planet. And then a total 180. My number 4 is Human Acts by Hong Kong. This is a very true story. Well, it's a fictionalized history story about the Gwangju massacres of 1980. in Gwangju, which is like the city that Hong Kong was born in. And if you do the math, she must have been like a child when this happened in her city. So that's crazy. It was a series of student protests that ended incredibly violently, and the state was responsible, which is just harrowing and horrifying. And for years they denied the numbers of deaths. A lot of children died, like young people, like teenagers and stuff. So it's a horrifying thing that happened. A lot of people were taken prisoner. It's actually horrific. And in this book, that kind of story is told. You get perspectives of like the day of like people who died, like fictionalized, but still, like, you know, people who were killed during the massacre themselves, people who were taken and tortured. And it's horrible. Like, it's absolutely horrible. And you get all these different perspectives, and you also get perspectives of people who survived it, or people whose family members died during it or were never found and stuff like that. So you just get like this like time spanning perspective on how absolutely horrifying these like violent acts. Sorry, my battery died. I think I was in the middle of saying that like the book is incredibly thought out. Like Hong Kong, you can tell she tried really hard to figure out what what were the points she wanted to get across, other than like the historical points. What points was she trying to make about like human behavior and, you know, mass acts of destruction and violence like this. The way it was written and a lot of narrative choices that were made were so interesting, and you could definitely unpack them for so long. This was phenomenal. Highly recommend. Number 3, I have a more upbeat choice, which is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. This is I want to say, people say sci-fi. It has a sci-fi setting for sure, and like sci-fi things, but it's really just kind of a romance novel. Like it's but better than most romance novels. Like I feel like I'm not selling it right. Like this is really special. It's a love story. Maybe it's not a romance novel. That I don't know if it would fall under romance novel. It's definitely a love story. It's like an epic love story between these two time traveling agents on the opposite side of a time war. That sounds crazy to you. I know. Don't look up more information about it. Just go read it. Like, trust me. But yeah, you're following red and blue. They're literally red and blue. You're just following them and not intertwining. How do you call that? Like, you know, one chapter red, one chapter blue, and they're having a correspondence. They start talking to each other even though they shouldn't. Like, it's like treason for them because they're enemies. They start writing letters to each other and leaving letters in space and time for each other to find, and it becomes really interesting. There's like, I can't tell you more. You're just plopped down into it. The writing is absolutely beautiful in this book. I was genuinely astounded. There are some incredibly beautiful lines more later on in the novel, but the writing is so good and so interesting. The idea of it is just incredible. I'm gonna read you one quote. However, I would like to read you more, but I just don't want to spoil it for you, and I also don't want you to miss out on the absolute treat that these lines are. Like, by the time you start encountering them, they just take your breath away. Oh my god. I will just read you this. This is maybe, I want red. I want to give you things. That's all I'm gonna say, because I feel like that's the most, like, maybe the least good of all the lines that I've like outlined. But do you know what I mean? Like, I want to give you things. I don't know how else, has you like giggling, kicking, and screaming, that's for sure. This book was so good. My number 2 read of 2024 was definitely East of Eden by John Steinbeck. This was incredible. This blew me out of the water. I didn't expect to really like it, and I just got completely roped into it. I was like, this is like almost like a Western novel. Like, that doesn't seem like my vibe. It's like early American history, like weird setting, and like there's some nature, right? I was like, this is not gonna be for me. This was so good. This is like undeniably an incredible novel. It spans a lot of time. It spans like 2 or 3 generations. This follows, well, I can't really tell you much about it. I don't want to spoil anything. It's just like these 2 families, and you follow certain characters from the families, and you kind of follow them through their lives. And there are like some, I don't know if this book has like a general plot that I could point out, but it has some really compelling characters that you get really attached to. As an interesting villain who's a woman, and she's like villainized in such a specific way. Like, she is a villain kind of like because of her intellect, which is interesting. There's also a lot about good versus evil, and like what that is, what is evil, and like apathy, and it's just, there's a lot in here, and I wish I could really explain it to you, and I'm really at a loss for words on how to explain this to you. It's just a story. Like, it's a really good epic story that you need to experience, and I think the characters will live with you forever, and The writing is, I mean, he's not exactly like a king of prose, I would say, Steinbeck. He's more like dry and kind of, you know, sharp and simple, I suppose. So there's nothing like particularly gorgeous about the writing, but the actual like plotting, the character work, like it's a hell of a story. My #1 read of the year is gonna sound ridiculous, and I'm so serious. I thought about this for a while. I was like, is this really like my favorite book of the year? That's crazy. Like that's like a huge statement to make. And it's a sequel, no less. It's also like an unpopular sequel. Like people didn't love this book. This is Authority by Jeff Vandermeer, and it's the second book in the Southern Reach trilogy, so it's a sequel to Annihilation. I've talked about Annihilation quite a lot on my channel. It's one of my favorite books ever. So I was super hesitant going into the second book because people were really saying it wasn't gonna be that good. No spoilers, by the way, I won't say any spoilers. I wish I could, but I can't, so I won't. So Annihilation takes place inside of Area X, which is like this like geographical anomaly where there's all this weird stuff going on, and the government is trying to like figure out where it came from. It just came down overnight. Like it just, all of a sudden there was this weird geographical anomaly, and all the radars were like going off. And so in the first novel, you follow an expedition team that goes into Area X to investigate it. And it's like first POV, you're in Area X, you can feel the weird vibes. Like it's claustrophobic, it's incredibly atmospheric. There's something about it just gets under your skin. It's just really such an immersive experience. Whereas the second book takes place right outside of Area X, like at the government agency like station that's like really close to the border of the area. And you would think, you know, that's super boring, and like, and yes, there is like a bureaucratic theme here. So there's definitely like that kind of like bureaucratic office life vibe, but there's like something so weird going on in this book, and you can just feel it. It just feels like something's going on every page, but it's not on the page, but you can like feel that there's something really weird happening, and it just kind of crawls under your skin and gets under your skin in such an unsettling way that you're just, for me, I was just like, I couldn't put it down. Like I needed to know what happened. There were so many interesting reveals in this book about the nature of Area X, or like the origins of Area X, that were like genuinely had me jaw on the floor. Many times during this book, I was just flabbergasted, jaw on the floor, and it's such a weird book. Like Annihilation is weird. Like Jeff Vandermeer makes weird fiction. He makes weird sci-fi that's like specifically for me. Like I am target audience. After this ending, which was insane, by the way, after this ending, I was like, yeah, like no, that's exactly, like if I were to write this book, that's exactly what I would have happen. So it's like, I feel like the target audience of Jeff Vandermeer. So for me, this was like incredible. I'm not gonna say I liked it better than the first book, but it's definitely a 5 stars for me. I'm not gonna say I like the first book better than this either. I just don't feel like that's something I can do, because they were two very, very different books that messed me up in very specific ways, and equally astounding, equally impressive. Like I could not possibly pick. And I think when a sequel is like that, that's actually crazy. That's actually crazy. Like how is that even possible? I'm gonna stop talking about it because it's a sequel. You need to read Annihilation first. Yeah, no, they're just insane. Vandermeer, his brain, I can't believe he's a real person. If you want to leave a comment, please leave me your top 3 reads of the year, because these are the videos that I actually get the most recommendations from. Like these are the videos where I'm kind of setting up what I'm reading for the next year, and I'm taking from all these videos.